It will be one of the biggest earthquakes in history. When the big one finally hits America's west coast, it will unleash carnage on a scale rarely seen. Buildings will collapse, burying thousands in rubble. Fires will break out, devastating entire city blocks. There will be landslides, dam failures, chemical spills. Things that, taken alone, would qualify as one of the worst disasters this side of Hurricane Katrina. But taken all together, will affect millions. And that's just for starters. Minutes after the shaking begins, a vast tsunami will roll in, washing away coastal communities and inundating hundreds of thousands of square miles. By the time the wave recedes, North America will have witnessed its worst ever natural disaster. The culprit behind all this misery? The Cascadia mega thrust fault, an offshore subduction zone capable of unleashing so much energy. It'd make the fabled San Andreas Big One look like a mere wobble. But rather than being hypothetical, this megaquake will soon become a reality. Estimates for it happening in the next 50 years range from a worrying 1 in 10 to a terrifying 1 in 3. In this video, we're exploring both the history of Cascadia and its apocalyptic future, so stick around till the end. The day before the orphan wave came, everything seemed normal. It was a cloudless afternoon across the islands, the sun shining, the air cold. No one in the Edo period in Japan felt any earthquakes, which was unusual for the Pacific Ring of Fire. As people went to bed, they had no idea that a disaster was about to strike. Shortly after midnight on January 27, 1700 AD, the wave arrived silently and without warning. Stretching about 600 miles, the tsunami's height, reaching 16.5 feet, caused significant damage. Miyako Bay, especially, faced severe impact. Kuwagasaki lost 13 houses, and fires claimed 21 more buildings. Tsugaruishi saw flooding half a mile up the main street, destroying homes and nearly wiping out a shrine. Along the eastern coast, rice paddies were damaged, homes flooded, and the government storehouses were destroyed. The most shocking part was not the damage itself, but the fact that the wave occurred without any preceding earthquake. In Japan, records dating back to at least the 6th century documented the connection between earthquakes and tsunamis. However, the 1700 tsunami appeared in the night without warning, leaving people perplexed. If the Edo period in Japan had been less isolated, they might have realized others were grappling with the same mystery. About 4,600 miles away, the native tribes of North America, including the Nu-Cha-Nulth people, the Maka, the Yoroka, the Tolowa, and more, experienced a violent shift in the earth roughly 10 hours before the orphan wave hit Miyako Bay. Unlike the Japanese, these indigenous peoples didn't keep written records, but relied on oral histories. The events of that night became legendary, etched into their stories as one of the most significant occurrences they had witnessed. The night Thunderbird attacked, there was no warning. It was a dark, gloomy evening in the Pacific Northwest, where rain was a constant. Suddenly, Thunderbird, a vast and invisible force, swooped down from the sky. She seized her nemesis, Whale, in her talons and lifted him into the air. High in the night sky, she dropped him, and Whale crashed back to Earth, shaking the world. The bay's waters receded, and the wise ones, foreseeing the danger, got into their canoes, surviving the impending flood. After the battle, a flood ensued. Villages disappeared, and people were swept away. Survivors witnessed strange sights, like canoes stranded in trees. Different indigenous tribes offered varied explanations for the shaking earth and the flood. In modern Oregon, Thunderbird was seen as either the hero defeating the evil whale or the villain attacking innocent whale. Some insisted the battle was between Thunderbird and Transformer, the creator of the world. On Vancouver Island, the Hu-ai-At people told of dwarfs on a giant mountain. A man's accidental kick of their drum resulted in his footsteps, causing earthquakes wherever he walked. In Northern California, the Yoroke people shared a tale of an earthquake whose heavy footsteps split the land and flooded the coast. They performed a jumping dance to drive the earthquake away, but the devastation remained. The Tolowa people's story focused on the flood, turning everyone it touched into snakes. A teenage boy and girl survived by climbing a hill, and when they descended, the world had been swept clean, replaced with sand, and saved only by their children. There are multiple stories recounting the events of the night when the Cascadia megathrust fault caused a massive earthquake in 1700, just off the Pacific Northwest coast. With an estimated magnitude of at least 9.0 on the Richter scale, this earthquake transformed the region and triggered the orphan wave that reached Edo, Japan. These stories, passed down through generations, were initially considered legends rather than historical accounts. While they continued to be told into the 20th century, their significance as factual records remained unrecognized. Modern scientists eventually unraveled the truth behind these tales, revealing the catastrophic impact of the Cascadia subduction zone. The Cascadia subduction zone is where the large North American tectonic plate encounters the smaller Juan de Fuca oceanic plate off the west coast of the U.S. These plates are constantly moving and can become stuck, leading to the formation of faults and, consequently, earthquakes. In the case of Cascadia, the Juan de Fuca plate is attempting to subduct beneath the North American plate but is stuck, causing compression and the gradual buildup of pressure. When this pressure is released, it results in a sudden shift of the plates, leading to a powerful earthquake. The potential impact of the Cascadia megathrust fault, capable of generating massive earthquakes, has raised concerns due to its history and geological characteristics. The fault runs between 600 and 700 miles from Cape Mendocino, California, to Vancouver Island, and its potential consequences could be devastating. While the central zone of the fault is relatively quiet, the northern and southern portions show constant activity. There is a possibility that only the southern section, focused around Northern California, could experience a major quake, registering around 8.0 or 8.6 on the Richter scale. But there's also a more catastrophic scenario where the entire Cascadia fault gives way, resulting in a megaquake with a magnitude of 9.2. Such an event would be around 30 times more powerful than anything the San Andreas Fault could produce, and could be one of the most significant earthquakes in history. Interestingly, the Cascadia Fault rarely produces minor quakes, which is unusual for a subduction zone. The lack of noticeable seismic activity led to the discovery of its capabilities in the 1980s, by which time settlements in the Pacific Northwest had developed without proper awareness of the potential risks. Geologists initially assumed Cascadia was an inactive or a seismic fault, leading to misconceptions in planning, including proposals for nuclear power plants in the region. The discovery of evidence for past megaquakes, such as floods, landslides, and tsunamis, prompted scientists to re-evaluate the threat posed by the Cascadia Fault, emphasizing the need for preparedness and awareness in the region. The Cascadia Fault's history and potential threat were initially overlooked until geologist Ruth Ludwig of the University of Washington turned to native oral histories. While there were no written records predating European settlement, the analysis of West Coast native tales revealed over 40 myths describing a massive quake and tsunami. These myths, when dated, clustered around the year 1700. In 1996, scientists confirmed that a 9.0 magnitude quake struck the Pacific on January 26, 1700, triggering tsunamis that affected North America and Japan. Further research showed that Cascadia had experienced 41 megaquakes over 10,000 years, suggesting a recurrence every 250 years. Considering the overdue period and potential scenarios, a Cascadia megaquake with a magnitude of 9.2 on the Richter scale could result in devastating consequences. The seismic waves would cause widespread destruction, impacting buildings, infrastructure, and human lives. The lack of strict building codes before 1994 makes structures vulnerable to collapse. Fires, electrical failures, bridge collapses, landslides, dam failures, chemical spills, and explosions would compound the disaster. The region would face extensive damage, with up to 75% of buildings compromised and various cascading disasters to manage. The aftermath of the Cascadia megaquake and tsunami would be catastrophic, resulting in widespread destruction, loss of life, and displacement. If the fault ruptures with a magnitude of 9.2, the initial quake would cause buildings to collapse, fires to break out, bridges to fall, and landslides, dam failures, chemical spills, and explosions to occur, creating a cascade of disasters. Following the earthquake, a massive tsunami would be generated, with waves reaching heights of 20 to over 100 feet. The tsunami would move at a speed of 12 miles per hour, sweeping away everything in its path, including boats, cars, and human bodies. The death toll would vary based on the time of the quake. In winter, an estimated 71,000 people in the flood zone could be affected, with a lower actual death toll due to evacuation efforts. But in summer, during peak beach attendance, the death toll could potentially reach nearly 200,000 people, particularly on holidays like July 4th. The tsunami's impact would extend inland, flooding over 100,000 square miles and affecting major cities such as Seattle, Portland, Eugene, Salem, Victoria, and Vancouver. FEMA estimates suggest a death toll of 13,000 and 27,000 injuries in a winter scenario, making it the worst natural disaster in U.S. history. Plus, up to 1 million people could lose their homes, and 2.5 million may urgently need food and fresh water. While the probability of a full-scale Cascadia event in the next 50 years is 1 in 10, there is a higher likelihood of an 8.0 damaging quake with a lower death toll. So, what do you think? Will we get an earthquake of that scale in this century? Or is this just another attempt at fear-mongering? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoy discussing the what-ifs and staying informed on interesting topics, hit that subscribe button for more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.